This week's presentation, Richard Diehl. Are you who you think you are? An overview of personality styles. Various therapists and teachers question if who we are is fully authentic, or rather that personality is largely a compensation for perceived child stresses. This fast-paced, data-dense talk will cover several models of personality types. Oh, I forgot to ask him how to say this person's name. As Alfred Korzybski, creator of the discipline of General Semantics, stated, "The map is not the territory. The word, our self-story, is never a complete map. Therefore, the more maps of reality we can understand and incorporate, the more accurate and complete is our understanding of ourselves." Richard Diehl is Ph.D., was a faculty member at State University of New York. His classes included Psychophysical Systems. He is also a retired traditional naturopath, acupuncturist, and international NLP trainer, and so much more. Please join me in welcoming Richard. Please turn off your cell phones. I forgot to say that. Did you turn yourself on, so to speak? Yeah, let me turn you on. Woo, baby!
That's off to a good start. Let's see here, let me just get set up. And I have to turn my own cell phone off, since I don't want to break the rules. Okay. Good morning, everybody. So welcome. So today I'm going to start with a demonstration that I would normally do with each of you in the group, but because of COVID, we're not going to do that. So I'm going to spray my hands, and I'm going to use paper towels, and I'm going to ask a couple of volunteers in the front room to indulge me. And those of you in the back will not be able to see what I'm doing, but I'll explain it thoroughly in a moment. Sir, would you be willing to be one of my models? Just hold your hand up, please. We'll put the paper towel between us. Great, great, excellent. Thank you. New paper towel. How about you, Kat? Oh, hold the hand up and press. There you go. Very good, thank you. And how about one more lady here? Would you be willing to do this? Great. And just hold. Lean against me, whatever you want to do. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Okay, so wherever I've done this, which is in 9 countries, I've discovered that when I have people hold their hand up, they always push back. No one ever gives up, lets it go, relaxes. There's always a push. So what does this tell us about our personalities, about who we are, the animal level? Are we reflexive? Are we reactive? Are we defensive? Are we aggressive? What happens when someone pushes? For example, if I say, I don't really like the way you dress, your response would probably be, who are you to talk, right? So we've always got that kind of personality pattern going on. And I want to do a further demonstration. Where did Dawn go? There she is. So I'm going to do another demonstration here. So yeah, so those of you in the back, what I did was I just asked people to hold their hand up. And when I pushed, they pushed back. They didn't surrender. They didn't dance with me. They resisted. Okay, so Dawn, my wonderful friend and model here. So what we're going to do is start by asking Dawn to be weak. Okay, floppy weak. Okay, is this the place someone wants to be during a discussion, argument, negotiation? Weak. No. Okay, now be strong. And I'm going to really work here. There we go. And I'm stronger than Cher, so she loses. Right now, what I'm going to ask you to do is imagine on the back wall are the people you love the most. And imagine that you're grounded and you have a fire hose of love that's squirting back to the back wall. And I'm just simply going to add to the fire hose and add more love. So now, just keep spraying. Ignore me and stay over there. And keep spraying, 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 and holding, and keeping. That's right. Okay, so the point I'm making here is when you can't fight and you can't flee, just flow. When we get caught up in the conflict of fighting, either you're weak and you lose, or you're strong and you get in a struggle. And this is all, thank you, Don, this is all the basis of thinking about personality, about who we all are as animals, how we work with fighting, fleeing, or preferably flowing and not getting caught up in the drama and the problems and the issues. Speaking of which, I had a little bit of a personal trauma this morning, so I might refer to my notes more than usual, but excuse me for that. Okay, I was going to tell a couple of jokes to start, but Steve didn't come and tell his silly jokes, so I guess I'll pass on those. Maybe I'll save them for later. Okay. My goal today is not to teach you personality systems because they're very complex and would take... Thank you. I've got a trainer over here who's teaching me to move my microphone when it drifts up in front of my face. So yes, today is not about teaching you models of personality. Those of you familiar with any of it, please excuse me for simplifying. My point is not to teach you the models, but rather to have you take a look at yourselves. Just like, do you fight, flee, or flow? Do you resist? What goes on inside you that's that compensatory pattern? So the place I want to start today is a pattern called the Enneagram. And the Enneagram is the world's oldest personality typing system. It's considered to be thousands of years old, perhaps. No one knows the original origins of it, but it's certainly been around a long time. And its original purpose, its right purpose, was actually to look inside and see what they call your ego fixation or your blind spot. What is it that actually runs you that you're not aware of? And it was overlaid on a pattern which my partner Gail and I are going to show you all so you can see what the actual Enneagram pattern looks like. So Gail, if you walk down that side, and I'll walk down this side so everybody can see the black line here. Imagine a clock with 9 times instead of 12. So it's a clock, but 9 is at the top rather than 12. So it's a 9-pointed diagram. And notice how all the lines continually go back and forth. Can everybody in the back see from here? Have to compare? Yeah, okay, great. So this is the actual Enneagram pattern. And it's actually sacred geometry that was involved in the building of the pyramids. And it's a repeating decimal, 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7, back to 1. So this pattern is sacred geometry, and they overlaid a personality typing system on this configuration. Okay, so again, the Enneagram it's turned into pop psychology. Oh, you're a 4, oh, you're a 2, oh, I'm a 3, and kind of labeling. In the original notion of the Enneagram, it was to do irreparable harm to someone, to tell them their type before they were had enough spiritual attainment. And so no one except the highest level people ever got to learn the whole system. And now, like I say, it's been kind of reduced to pop psychology where, and let me explain a little bit of that. So the Enneagram is designed about looking at your dark side, but how can you write a book that says, you're screwed up this way, and you're screwed up that way, and you're screwed up that way? So a woman named Helen Palmer wrote a book that popularized the Enneagram and said, you're either unhealthy or average or healthy. Okay, if you're unhealthy, you get feedback that something's wrong, and perhaps you get entrenched, and perhaps you change your act. If you're healthy and everybody admires your act, you polish your act and you're cool, and you just stay there forever, and you never look inside and disidentify. So again, this is a pattern about disidentification from ego. And I was very fortunate. I was a guest lecturer at Esalen Institute in the late 70s, and I came across Claudio Naranjo, who had been there, a Chilean psychiatrist. And Claudio had just taught the Enneagram for the first time in America. So the original version and the way it's changed now, not surprisingly, has been quite different. There are 3 issues, and I'll show you the next pattern here, my thing. And Gail, if again you would just go down the side here. So within the other design, there's also a 3-pointed triangle, also with a 9 at the top. And these represent the 3 major issues involved in the Enneagram, which I'll talk about in a minute. Let Gail catch up a little bit here. Everybody in the back can see this okay? 3, 6, 9. I don't have a 3 or a 6 written. Oh, I guess I do. 3, 6, 9. Okay. So these are the core issues which we're going to talk about momentarily. Okay. So these were arbitrary designations of 1 through 9. I guess we could have made them colors or something other types of flowers. Thank you, Gayla. Okay, so the issue with 3 is what's called image, which could be loosely translated to sexuality. So 3s are human doings, not human beings. They're all about ego and being acknowledged and being self-important. And the original word for them was go, the person always on the go. For those of you who know Tony Robbins, he would be a perfect example of a 3 on the Enneagram. Always ego-driven, always pushing it. And I just realized I want to tell you one of the other labels here. Achiever and performer. I forget the new names because I learned the old names, but again, they tried to soften some of them. So the go, the achiever, the performer. Vanity is their issue. They're always trying to look good. So that's about the number 3. And you'll see why I'm doing this way if you bear with me. The issue of 6 is about fear. And the original name for fear was cow for coward. So they weren't cowardly like the scarecrow, or was it the lion in Alice in Wonderland? I guess it was the lion who was the coward in there. But they're loyalists, they run by fear. George Bush Jr. was a good example of a cow. He overreacted to what happened after 9/11, at least in my opinion, but whether you agree or not, he would be this classic type of, ooh, there's danger everywhere, we gotta watch out, we gotta protect, we gotta overcompensate. So the cow, the 6, is always concerned about fear issues, which runs a lot of people's lives. And as I'm talking about this, just pay attention to if any of these ring a bell for you, if they fit. The third issue is, it was the 9, and that's called an indolent. And indolence is another way of putting that is about anger management. So anger management, and some people say there's 9 types, or 8 types rather, and the 9 sits at the top, and the 9 doesn't take action. The 9 looks over here and says, well, I could probably do that, or maybe I should do that, or maybe that's better. So they're sort of stuck in the mud, and they don't take action. They just kind of get frozen a lot of the time. They don't stick up for themselves. They don't ask for what they need. The current names for them would be peacemaker and mediator. So now we have 3 basic issues. We have image, or close to sexuality. We have fear, and we have indolence, which could also be called anger management. So these are the 3 core issues, and just notice for a minute if any of them resonate more. We're not going to have a show of hands, no one has to tell who they are, but just see if any of those issues feel more authentic, more connected, or maybe more disowned than the other ones. Sometimes, for many of us, the really disowned issues are the ones that are most where we're caught up. Again, the disidentification. I couldn't be like that. I would never be like him. Well, maybe there's some projection there, who knows? Okay, so now we've got the 3 basic issues, and now what we have are called internal and external distortions, which is where the rest of this pattern comes in. And Gayla, you don't need to do this again, because I think people have already seen this once. In fact, so now, maybe you do, Gayla, this one. So now you see the overlay of the Enneagram pattern, the 9 types, and oh, I just forgot to mention something important. I'll come back to that in a minute. So now you see the 9 types plus the triangle in the middle, with the triangle representing the 3, 6, 9, and the other ones, which are not numbered, representing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So what I forgot to mention, about the sacred geometry of the numbers of the Enneagram is when you multiply the 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7 by 2, you come out with the same numbers in a different sequence. In other words, there's no 3, 6, or 9, or 0 in there. When you multiply it by 3, 4, 5, or 6, you get the same thing. The numbers are still the same numbers in a different sequence. And when you multiply it by 7, you get 9, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9. So there's some magic in that number, allegedly. Again, that was based in building the pyramids and some of the things. Okay, back on track here. So we got to the point of the central issue of 3, 6, 9, fear, image, fear, and anger management. And now we're going to overlay what's called the external and the internal distortion of each of these issues. So the 2 and the 4, being on either side of the 3, represent the external and the internal distortions of image. The 2, which was called the flatterer, the 2 is someone who doesn't know who they are, who has no real self-perception, and it's sort of the slogan would be, well, I don't know what I want, but if you're happy, I must be happy. So twos tend to be givers, caretakers, nurses, grandmas. But because twos have a false self, remember this is all about false selves and disidentification. Twos have a false self, so they give to get, but they don't really know they want anything back. And later on we'll jump into more of the pattern, but just for now we'll say when they get fed up enough because they keep giving and not getting what they want, something happens. We'll come back to what that is in a bit. The internal distortion of the image type, the 4, is called the melancholy. They tend to be artistic, they tend to dress well, they tend to have certain artistic qualities, individualists, and their pattern is called the go away closer. If you want me, I'm out of here. If you don't want me, I'm going to hang on for dear life. It's a constant push-pull. Go away closer. Can't live with you, can't live without you. So the melancholies are the tragic romantics. They always want what they can't have. Okay, so that's the image issue. 3 being about image, the go. 2 being about the external distortion, about flattery. 4 being the internal distortion, about melancholy, about loss, about tragic romanticism. Now let's move to the 6, to the fear. The external and the internal distortion of the 6, of course, are 7 and 5. The external distortion is called the plan, or the epicure, and 7s, the way they deal with their fear is they're always out in the future. They're always making plans. They may not make the plans happen, they just try to avoid the present by being endlessly out in the future and trying to accomplish something. 7s at a high level are fun to be with, they're great partiers. At the lower level, they tend to be the drug addicts, the flakes who say, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And 7s look like they really like you, but they like what you have to offer. And when the good time is gone, so are they. Again, that's at the pathological level. But nevertheless, they're fun. The internal distortion is called the stinge, or the librarian. And the reason for the name stinge isn't because they're cheap with their money, but they hold back a part of themselves. You never get to contact them. They're always withdrawn, held, and somewhat secretive. They crave knowledge, book learning. Books, knowledge are more important than people for them, and they're the people you hardly ever run into because they're often not out in public. Okay, lastly, the 9. So we're back to anger management, or in the case of the 9, indolence. I'm stuck. I don't know where to move. The external distortion of 9, of course, is the 8. And the 8 is called the venge, the boss. And venges are like the Clint Eastwood characters. You know at the end of the movie he's going to be the only one left alive. So venges are about overt anger, about control. Both Ronald Reagan, who was a healthy 8, and Donald Trump were both 8s. They're both the boss, the strong, my way or the highway kind of folks. The internal distortion, the 1, is called the resent. Everything's fine, thank you. There's nothing wrong here. Resents hold on to things, and they're perfectionists. They always demand perfection. They're never happy. Something's not right in the world. If only it were different. Blah blah blah. But they seethe, they resent, they hold grudges, and they get stuck. Okay, so I've presented 9 different types. Again, if you're really interested, you Google this and get a lot more information about the details, but at least I've given you an overview. Now, the next part is really important. Why in the world is this here? Why aren't they just 9 types around a clock or in a row, in a column? And the reason for that is there's something called a stress space and a heart space. Your stress place, of course, is where you go in stress, and your heart place is where you go when you're open, not necessarily in love like in a romantic relationship, but in love, open with the world. So each of these lines, including the triangle, let me grab the other one, each position connects to 2 other places, right? So unlike most models of personality where you're a psychopath, you're a sociopath, you're a narcissist, and you're stuck with that label forever, with the Enneagram there's actually movement. You have your basic personality, plus you have your stress space and your heart space. So let me give you a couple examples of that. For a 2, a flatterer who's so sweet, as I mentioned earlier, 2s can be very manipulative. I want to go back and remind you that you could be anywhere from very healthy, average, to very unhealthy, of any of these types. No type is better than the other, although I have my biases, and probably you do, as I've described some of them as well. So the 2, the flatterer, the nicest person on the whole Enneagram, is giving to get. Mother Teresa is a 2, but obviously she's giving to get something in the afterlife, perhaps, where some stereotypic grumpy old grandma says, oh, for all those years that all I've done for you and you never gave me anything back. So those are both within the 2 pattern. When the 2 breaks down and they go into 8, revenge, boom. When they go into the 8, revenge, then all of a sudden they're raging at you. Why the hell didn't you take care of me? And you say, well, I didn't know. You never told me you had any needs. How would I know? Well, you should have known. Why didn't you? Okay. In the 2's heart space, they go into the melancholy, the 4, and suddenly they become the tragic romantic. Oh, I want this relationship, but not today. But don't go away. Wait for me, because I'll be there. Well, maybe I'll be there. I'm not sure. And they do the push-pull oftentimes. Okay, so those are examples of how one of the patterns works. Let me use another one, the 9, the indolent. So the 9 is kind of stuck, and when they get into their fear place, they go into the 6, into the cow, into the fear, and now they freeze, they resist, they run away, they hide, they don't want to engage, they don't want anything to do with anybody, they'd rather go run away. In their heart space, they go into the 3 or the go, and they're totally there, and they're the greatest, present, excited, let's go have fun, let's do good things. But their basic self is very much self-contained and somewhat protected and unknowable. Okay, so I'm going to stop with the Enneagram in a moment and move on to yet another model. But I guess I'll wait for questions if you have questions. But I hope I've presented enough of a comprehensive model that you have some overview of an idea that many of you, I'm sure, have heard of. The Enneagram is sort of a popular buzzword these days, and some of you, I suspect, know more about it than I do, and again, some of you probably never heard of it. Okay. Enneagram is one of my 2 favorite or most useful, I'd call it most useful models. And I'd say that for many of us, well, one of the meta programs is sameness or difference. Everybody's the same, they're just like me, or everybody's different. Well, in fact, everybody has some characteristics in common, as well as some characteristics that are different. So these personality models allow us to look at, oh, no wonder I don't get along with that person because they're this and I'm this. Rather than just judging them, you can actually start to filter through the models and make more sense of your world, both for who you are and for others. Okay, we'll have a sip of water and move on. This is a model that I suspect no one here has heard of, and probably won't be able to pronounce. I was in Tokyo writing a training, and I actually ran into the trade minister from South Africa, and I was going to go to South Africa later on, and he introduced me to a group of people, which is where I learned about this particular model, and they had gone to South Africa a total of 20 plus times and trained all of de Klerk's people and all of Mandela's people. Now, for those of you who don't recall, South Africa was very apartheid, and finally the world couldn't take it anymore, and there's a lot of pressure, sanctions on South Africa to shift into a more balanced place. And Nelson Mandela, who'd been in jail for a long time, was the prime candidate because he was well known, but he was resistant to fitting into a capitalist system because he was more of a socialist communist. So my distant colleagues, Beck and Cowan, with this model went down 20 times. It's a values model, and they trained all these people. And I did some work with some of them. I actually managed to train or work with the mayor of Soweto, which was at the time the biggest slum in the world. And I was very fortunate. I had the highest level of students there. I had bank presidents and corporation presidents and other corporation presidents. And my most amazing one was Frances Kendall, who was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize for her book on solutions for South Africa and ran against Mandela. Okay, I could tell you more stories there, but I'm not going to. So hold on to your seats. This is called the double helix cyclical emergent scale of mature adult biopsychosocial behavior. Yes, it's real. So let's explain that. Let's break that down. Double helix, like DNA strands, a set of perceived problems and a set of coping mechanisms. Okay, so we all recognize there's some problems in our lives, in the world, and we have to figure out some way to cope with them. Successfully or not, we try to cope with those problems. So that's the double helix. Cyclical is because every time you make a shift, you go from sacrificial to expressive, back to sacrificial, which is where the emergent part comes in. I will give you more specifics in a minute. I'm just building a theoretical model. So actually, I'm not quite ready for this. Let me make sure I get the right one. Okay, so cyclical, back from expressive to sacrificial to expressive to sacrificial. Emergent means each time someone makes a shift, that they open up their horizons, they have more choices, a bigger perspective, more worldly. So double helix, cyclical emergent scale of mature adult biopsychosocial behavior. Okay, Gail, let you show this last one, please. So this is two-dimensional, but if you imagine it as a three-dimensional spring, and I'll talk about the names and the patterns, but just to kind of give you a visual representation, I will walk further back. So imagine this is a three-dimensional spring that as it winds around, all the numbers over here are, these numbers are expressive and these are sacrificial. And I'll explain more of that in a minute, but let me give you a better view of this. So remember, think of this as a three-dimensional coil spring, even though it's represented in flat terms. So you can see Clare Graves, the guy who invented this or developed it, actually was a professor of psychology, and he observed his students and graduate students and colleagues for many years to start to develop this values model. And values, I should say, are defined as those things that we actually spend our time, money, and energy on. So probably everybody you encounter would say, save the whales, but do we really put our time, energy, and money towards that? So there's buzzwords that we claim are values, but where are our real values? And that's what Graves was looking at. What are your real values? Okay, so he used colors, but we could also use numbers to make it a little simpler. And let me just read the list, and I'll go back and fill it in. So beige, or number one, are bands. Number two is purple and tribes, and I will explain what all this means. I'm just giving you the overview first. Threes are red, about power. Excuse me, fours are blue, about law and order. 5 is orange, about capitalism and rewards. 6 is green, about inclusion. Yellow, about holists and generalists. And turquoise are globalists, but not in the sense we usually use the word, but people really see the big picture. Okay, having given you the labels, let's go back and break that down. Level 1 almost doesn't exist anywhere in the world anymore. Maybe mentally ill homeless people, maybe people have been scattered after a war. Bands are pre-tribal. Bands are kind of where you've seen perhaps a cartoon of some caveman dragging the woman by the hair into the cave. They come together for sex, for food, for protection, but they're really one person for themselves. They're not part of a group yet. And everybody's expressive. Everybody's out for themselves. But eventually they realize that that doesn't work very well, and they organize themselves into tribes. So now they become sacrificial or submissive. All the tribal people are told what to do by their elders, their chieftains. They become superstitious. They become aware of totems, of gods, of pantheists, things that happen in the world. Oh my God, there was a rainstorm. They're smoting me. I better pray more, sacrifice a chipmunk or something. I don't know. Anyhow, so bands eventually organize themselves into tribes where everybody is sacrificial except the chiefs. Now eventually some of the young bucks in the tribe get tired of being told what to do and having to be subservient, and they go back into the expressive level again, into what we'll loosely call the rednecks. These are the people who are the troublemakers on the planet, who are stimulus response, the hell with you, only out for me, dominate, don't be dominated. They're run by shame, by power, And they are, as you shall see when I give you some specific examples, the real problem people on the planet. So they're right here, stimulus response. They haven't yet learned consequence. Only after the level of 3 does the brain machinery become complex enough that people start to understand consequence. Levels 1, 2, and 3 are all right now, got to have it right now, survival levels. So eventually, people, and in the Old West, we had the gunslingers, and level 4, which I'll get to, the sheriffs trying to suppress the gunslingers. In South Africa, there was an interesting thing where at one point all the Zulus started marching with their clubs, and they said they wouldn't vote, and they were real involved because they were the 3s. And then Chief Baudelezi told them, cool it or else, and they all mellowed out and the elections proceeded. But that's a whole other story. But he was able to control all the toughs because they still had tribal instincts in them, even though they'd emerged past that. Okay, so finally the brain machinery develops enough for consequence, and now we have the British rule system. The rules are the rules, the one true way, my way, we got to do it this one right way. So interestingly enough, both extreme religion and communism have that same idea of deferred rewards. Be good now, get your gold watch later, get your heaven later, make the society better later. So for the first time now we have consequence, we have future, we have the need for, and guilt is used a lot. And it's, you're either with us or you're against us. Bipolar thinking, right, wrong, good, bad, us, them, emerges into a real systematized way of being. So now we've got a nice stable society where everybody does what they're told and everybody's behaved, and we're still trying to stop the few number 3s from acting out. And eventually, some people at the 4 level go, hey, everything's working, and I'm tired of waiting for heaven in 20 years. I want heaven and earth now. And they go again into expressive, into the capitalist system. The healthier ones are productive business leaders. The unhealthier ones are like Bernie Madoff. For the most part, a level 5 are folks who express selves to get their stuff, their needs met now, but unlike the 3s and the 1s, not to produce anger or frustration or be targeted by the rest of society. So Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, although we have some judgments about them, started out as good capitalists, good level 5, evolving out of the rules and breaking the rules and making money and being successful. So eventually, the robber barons start to threaten the environment and realize that they may be having a midlife crisis at whatever age, and they're not able to, and they're having problems with their families and their friends because they're too greedy and too self-centered. In fact, the slogan for the 5 is the person who dies with the most toys wins. My favorite slogan for the 5s is too much is barely enough. Right? So eventually, people just can't handle all of that robber baron behavior, and they shift once again now to the 6th level, to the what I call the kumbaya level. And it's interesting that even though the 6s are only 1 or 2% of the planet, in my circle, both here where I live in California the rest of the year, most of my friends or acquaintances look like 6s, so it gives me this distortion that everybody's in this category, even though it's a very small percentage. So 6s are concerned about everybody's well-being. They were the Vietnam War veterans who want, not veterans, protesters, make love, not war, let's have peace now, let's make a good life for everybody, let's take care of the world, and again, sacrificial. They want to connect. They want to be part of a family, part of a community, part of something. But, unfortunately, they end up not always being very effective. When you try to get consensus, I mean, a hierarchy is efficient. A dictator makes things happen right away. When you're waiting for consensus for everybody to agree, it doesn't work very well. And they become inefficient and become frustrated. At this point, a whole other level of brain machinery gets more complex, and people shift to 7, where they're again expressive. At the 7 level, you've got holists and generalists who now recognize that the world is in some danger, and they really need to start to pay attention and speak out and do things. And the 7s tend to be very upset at the punishment of 4s at the excessive rewards of 5s and of the ineffectiveness of 6s. And for the first time, another level of ability comes where the 7s start to recognize it's not the one true way, either punishment, reward, or connectedness, but that different folks for different strokes, that everybody might be different. I have to treat you different than you, than you, than you. And this complex brain machinery allows people to see the world in a whole more complex way. And that's, the 7s are supposedly only 0.1% of the population. The 8s exist, and they're the final number, once again are sacrificial, and they exist in such small numbers that they're more theoretical. Gandhi, Jesus, Mother Teresa, the radical Greenpeace people who were in the dinghies between the whales and the whaling ships who are willing to risk their lives. So the 8s are sacrificial. They're willing to give everything because they realize the planet is in trouble, and they're willing to give up their own lives for that. Okay, so that's our second model, and for me, an incredibly useful model because I realize, again, I'm giving you just a big picture thumbnail, but management styles for different levels, interaction styles for different levels. How do I connect with a level 3? I have to be tough or submissive. I can't come in above them because they'll beat me up. But if I'm working with a 5, then I have to talk about money and success. If I'm working with a 6, we have to kind of get in the groove together and so on. So with this understanding of values models, I'm more successful at connecting with different groups of people rather than saying, oh, you're different, oh, you're too weird, or you're whatever. Okay. So let's see here. Take a breath, take a moment to pause because there's a lot of data. Now I'm going to, how are we doing with time? It's only 5 minutes left? Oh my God. But I've got 2 more hours to talk. Okay. Okay, well give me 1 second to decide what's most important here. I was going to talk about Freud and id egos and superegos and oral anal and genital phases and things like that, and Myers-Briggs. Okay, let me talk about Virginia Satir, because Virginia Satir was my third most important model. In psychotherapy, in most of psychotherapy, at least up until Virginia Satir came along, you were the problem. You were your own issue. You stood as an individual. Virginia Satir applied systems theory to psychology. So you're part of a system, and most notably part of a family system. So here's a great example. I used to live in Hawaii for 31 years, and these South Pacific Islanders would come, and they have these look, listen rules. So in most of the South Pacific, Fiji, Tahiti Islands, and Native Hawaiians, you never look at your elders. When they talk to you, you look down in deference. So these kids move to Hawaii, where they're taught to look down and show deference. The teacher says, look at me when I talk to you. They go home, they get yelled at. The teacher says, look at me. What happens to them? So they live in a system. And here's another example. Johnny gets, okay, I'm married. My wife and I don't get along so well. And Johnny, our kid, is always getting in trouble in school. Now the two of us bond together because we